So for the reader, I'm going to introduce to you a whole new world that most of you are probably not even aware of. That's been there for a long time, but just has not gotten a lot of publicity. As I mentioned, there's television shows about NCIS. There's probably about 12 different spin-offs by now. But this is the Air Force. And normally when you see the Air Force in movies, you see fighter jets, trailing Air Force One. But the majority of the people in the Air Force are not pilots. The majority of the people in the Air Force are enlisted people that do the majority of the work, the backbone of the Air Force. And the majority of the special agents within the Office of Special Investigations are enlisted people. And so what I wanted to do is tell their story, to pull back the curtain and to allow the reader to experience what they experience as people, not just as agents, what it takes to get into the organization and the stresses that they encounter every day by doing that job.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the author podcast, where we get to meet great authors from around the world who tell great stories. Some are imagined stories, and some are based on real things. And our guest today on the podcast, Derrick's here to talk about his writings. He's got a book in the world and a new one coming soon. And I'm excited to have him here on the story and to also acknowledge someone who has proudly served his country and done some great things to bring peace and safety to the world. I'm so excited to have him here. Derrick, welcome to Living the Next Chapter, and thank you for your service.
Hey, Dave, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the invite to come and talk to you today. Looking forward to a really great conversation.
Exciting. Can you tell everybody, where are you joining me from in this great big world of ours?
I currently live in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I'm originally from Alabama, but because I spent so many years in the Air Force traveling, I ended up settling here in Virginia.
Amazing. Okay, so let's do kind of a Air Force term, a flyover of your career a little bit.
Sure.
Can you give us a sense of kind of what you've done and kind of maybe a little bit of where you've been in this world?
Absolutely. So I joined the Air Force immediately after graduating high school a long time ago. Mainly because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. And I thought, well, I could spend a few years in the Air Force trying to figure that out. And so I joined as a jet engine mechanic. And I did my first 4 years in Dover, Delaware, working in the engine shop. The engines were taken off the airplanes, and then we take them apart, put them back together, test them out before they got, reinstalled back on the airplanes. And I was working transport airplanes at the time. I did 4 years in Delaware, and I was trying to go to Japan, but I ended up getting a 4-year assignment in Hawaii. So things worked out really great for me. At that point, I was still working transport airplanes, but now I'm on the flight line, launching and recovering planes every day. At that point, I started to think, okay, what's going to be, next for me after the Air Force? I only had about 4 or 5 years in at the time, but I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life working on airplanes. I enjoyed it at the moment, but I wanted to do something else. And I became interested in federal law enforcement. And so I started taking classes in my free time towards my degree in criminal justice. And after 4 years in Hawaii, I came back to the mainland to Panama City, Florida, to Tyndall Air Force Base and to a fighter aircraft unit. I was working F-15s. And I couldn't cross train then because I had to be on station for a whole year. So I just continued to take the classes when I could. And once that year expired, I decided I would find the courage to go across the street to the OSI building and ask, if I could get a briefing on what they did, because I guess you could vision OSI as being the FBI of the Air Force. It's the Office of Special Investigations. And for any listeners who love the television show NCIS, it is the exact same thing as the real, not the television show, but the real NCIS, but the Air Force version. And so I applied. It took about 6 months for me to go through that process. I got notified that I got accepted. And 2 weeks later, I was in Georgia in training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. So that was about 5.5, maybe 6 months, I think. Initially, you go through training with the Department of Homeland Security with the Criminal Investigator Training Program. As soon as that program is over, you immediately start the OSI Basic Investigations course, which is also at the same location. So that's another couple of months to train you specifically how to conduct Air Force investigations. So after graduation, I assumed that I would go to a different base. However, I got sent right back to the base that I came from, which was a little bit strange. But I did about 10 months there, and then I was sent to Osan Air Base in South Korea. And this is where the majority of the book takes place. Um, Coming there, I'm still on probation because you have to do your first 12 months as a probationary agent, and so much is thrown at you so fast. So when I get there, I was still learning, and they placed me in charge of black marketing. They placed me in charge of drug investigations, and I was really kind of struggling to understand. Okay, how do I get this done? No excuses because nobody cares that you're brand new. They just know that you've got a badge in your pocket and you're supposed to have all the answers. And so I got with some like-minded individuals who, like me, didn't want to sit at the desk all day doing paperwork. We wanted to get up and go talk to people. And us getting up and going to talk to people kind of inadvertently triggered a whole bunch of bad things that happened in the book. And so I know we're going to go into detail about the book in just a little bit, but I did a year at South Korea. And after that, I had my choice of assignments. And I found out that the OSI had created a brand new team that was doing dedicated counterintelligence work for the Air Force Special Operations Command at Hurlburt Field, which is also in the Florida Panhandle. So I volunteered for that, thinking I'd probably spend the next 3 to 4 years going to Afghanistan and Iraq, doing counterintelligence work. But then I found out because we had other agents who were trained for that mission, highly trained for that mission, that the Special Operations Command wanted to send us to places where no one else was there. A lot of times, places that you wouldn't hear about, and there would be a very small, if any, military presence. And uh, they wanted us to go prior to that mission to these locations to determine what the threat was, to develop our contacts, come back and brief the commanders on, what they could expect once they got to that location. And depending on the level of the threat, a lot of times we could go back with them while they're carrying out that operation, that mission, whatever it may be. And our job was to watch their back, to keep them safe so that they could do what they needed to do. So yeah, I did that for about 4 years. Then I got an assignment to come back to DC to the Protective Services Detachment, mainly protecting foreign dignitaries that were visiting DC and traveling throughout the country. But that didn't last but about 2 or 3 months because I promoted myself out of a job. And then I got a phone call from my boss over at Andrews Air Force Base, which is now Joint Base Andrews. And they said, hey, we need someone to come over and take over the fraud attachment, the fraud unit. And I had no fraud investigation experience at all, but it was a challenge that I accepted. And it turned out to be one of the best assignments I ever had. It took me probably about a year to really get spun up into economic crime investigations because I had been traveling the world, running and gunning 100 miles an hour for the past 4 or 5 years. And now I'm doing financial fraud investigation. So it was a big change. So I did that for 3 years, and then I retired from the Air Force after 21 years.
Wow. So do you still know how to fix an airplane engine?
I probably could do a little bit.
Okay. All right.
But they've got some new ones since I've left, so I probably won't know a lot about them.
Okay, so coming from high school, let's jump back for a second. How much did you know about the military, about aircraft engines coming out of high school? Like, did you have any knowledge coming into this role?
Well, my father was in the Army for 2 years, so he got drafted to go to Vietnam. But that was in the late 60s, and I graduated in the mid 90s. So I knew he was in the Army. I had an uncle at the time who was in the Air Force. And so seeing him when he would come home on leave in his uniform, kind of sparked something in my mind that I didn't realize was happening at that time because my senior year, his son and I were very close, and we're getting close to graduation time. And we're looking at each other like, man, what are we gonna do? And he said, well, I'm going in the Air Force. And I said, well, me too. And that me too for me sparked a 21-year career.
Wow.
And also he did 20 years. And so Just that simple conversation changed both of our lives. But to further answer your question, I had no idea about airplanes other than what I watched on television. And
Wow.
I remember, when I was a kid, I watched Top Gun, and at that point, I did kind of fall in love with jets. And so I remember, when I was younger, I used to watch television shows on the History Channel about airplanes because I thought they were very interesting, but I didn't think it was something I wanted to do until I started doing it. And that kind of seems to follow me throughout my life, especially when I
Yeah.
got to writing, because I never thought I'd be a writer until I became one.
Interesting, because you learned how to fix airplane engines, which is something you have to make sure you fix them right because the plane's in the air, it's got to work. And then you're learning how to do fraud investigations, you're learning how to do all these different tasks.
Mhm.
It's like you just went to the next thing and had to learn again. So you're always in this learning mode, I would think. And is that something that is attractive to you to be constantly like learning new skills and developing yourself?
It wasn't when I was younger. I
Okay.
just wanted to be comfortable. But the more what I've learned is the more that you put yourself in uncomfortable situations, the more attracted you get to that. Because
Mm.
once you go to the next level, then you can see what else is available for you if you just keep digging a little bit more. If you keep training, keep learning, so many other doors and opportunities are open for you.
So let's bring it to the author side for the authors listening. What made you decide to become an author? Was it a person? Was it a situation? What sparked it from you to go from all of this military background to saying I'm going to become an author?
When I was stationed in South Korea, there were so many incredible investigations going on. And my coworkers and I would sit around and laugh, and we'd say, no one would ever believe this stuff. If we could tell them, no one would ever believe one day one of us is going to have to write a book. And we were just joking around about it. And I never thought it would be me who would write it. And so after I did my 21 with the Air Force, I retired and I got a job in North Carolina doing corporate investigations. So it was a lot slower pace, a steady, 9 to 5 type job. And I found myself with a lot more free time than I did when I was in the Air Force. And I decided, well, I think now is a good time to tell this story. And initially, I started writing for about 30 days. And then we had a major restructure at my job, which required me to relocate to Virginia to start with another agency that I currently work for. But after the relocation and everything kind of settled down for me, I still felt this story, in my spirit that I needed to tell.
Hmm.
And so again, once everything kind of settled down, got the kids back in school and everything was back to normal, I had this energy in me that I needed to release, and writing was the way that I needed to do it.
Where did you learn how to write as an author?
Well, the first place I learned how to write was in OSI because you write uh, reports of an investigation. And then there's a certain style of how that's done. And then there's counterintelligence reports. And then when I got to fraud, the reporting style changed a little bit more. And then when I got in corporate investigations, their writing style changed a little bit more. And every place that I went, even though I had to learn something completely new, it was adding to my own personal style of writing. And so I was a little bit nervous to begin writing the book because I wasn't sure, how I was going to do it. But what I didn't want to do is write a book that was all policy and procedures.
Right.
When you write a criminal investigative report, you're only talking about facts and your opinions don't matter. On this day, this person did this at this time. Period. When I think about it, doesn't matter. It doesn't even go in there. But now this is a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different because the opinions and the thoughts and the feelings of all the characters absolutely mattered. And so for me, it took a little bit of time for me to figure out how I was going to blend all that together because I wanted the reader to be able to tell that I had experience by the way I was writing it. When it came to processing the crime scene or the interrogation scenes or the surveillance scenes, I wanted to put enough in there so that you knew that I had the experience doing that. But I also wanted to dial it back a little bit so that you get the emotion from the feeling, not just the technicalities.
And the thing to complicate all of this, another whole level that a lot of authors that I talk to don't have to deal with. We talked about this before we record. You have is someone looking over your shoulder at what you're writing and in your book, and you need to get approval to talk about some of these things. And you got to be careful that you don't write certain things that could be a problem.
Exactly.
So you have another layer of accountability in your words, where a lot of the authors I talk to, they don't have to worry about that. So how are you self-editing as you write, knowing that I probably can't talk about this certain situation, I'm going to leave it out? Or are you putting it out there and seeing what happens? How do you juggle? We're going to talk in general terms here.
Yeah.
How do you juggle knowing that someone else has to review your work before you can proceed? Because a lot of authors I talk to, they don't have to deal with this. So how is this unique for you?
So for me, before I write, I have to understand what's the basic story that I want to tell. Because a lot of it, especially in the first book, about 75% of it in some way or fashion is based off of true events. And so it's a delicate situation for me to determine, okay, how much of the truth do I want to put in this book? And then the parts that are the truth, I have to change it a little bit to, number one, protect people's, backgrounds, protect their identities. And then I want to protect the people that are still doing a job. I want to put enough in the story to make it believable, but I don't want to harm the people who are actually carrying out these types of investigations today. And so I do a lot of self-editing, and before I can publish the book, as soon as I finish it, before I can send it to an editor or anyone else to review my book, I have to send it to the Department of Defense. And I hope I don't get the name wrong. It's the Defense Office of Publication and Security Review. When I contacted them, I sent it to them. They told me it would take about 3 months, but they were kind of backed up. So to be patient. And so 3 months to the day, I was waiting for that email to come back, and I didn't get it. And so, okay, I give them another couple of weeks, 4 months, nothing. So now I'm starting to get a little worried because I'm thinking that the DOD sent it to the Air Force. The Air Force sent it to OSI. They're reading it. They're going to take out so much of this that I'm going to have to rewrite, pretty much the whole book. So 5 months into the waiting period, I had really started to give up. I was like, okay, by this point, they should have absolutely read it by now. They didn't like it. They're not going to approve it. And then I convinced myself that I wouldn't even put it out, because I didn't go into depression, but I started thinking some bad thoughts about, man, I did all this work. And now no one's ever going to read it. And then I decided, well, nobody should read it anyway. I just keep it to myself. And that day I determined I wasn't going to publish the book. And I went to pick my son up at football practice. He got in the car and I pulled back out to the traffic light, and I'm sitting there, just kind of down at the dumps. And there was a blue pickup truck in front of me. And for some reason, I looked down at the license plate, and the license plate said Shadow 1, which was the name of my book that I was waiting to get approval.
No.
Yeah. The same day that I said I wasn't going to publish the book, the truck in front of me had the title of my book on its license plate.
No.
And so I came back home and I called the DOD and I said, hey, I'm just checking, on the status. I submitted this 5 months ago. And he puts me on hold and comes back and says, we approved it. We didn't tell you? No, no one told me anything. So on that day is when I found out that the Department of Defense approved my book to get published, which was a crazy scenario for me, but I was so excited. I was running around the house like a little kid.
And thank you to that blue truck owner and that license plate. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now, maybe.
Right.
Wow. That's pretty unique. Like, that's kind of like the universe tapping you on the shoulder saying,
Right.
Derrick, don't give up on your dream. Like, come on.
Yeah. I don't know where this journey is going to take me, but now I have confirmation that I'm supposed to be on this journey. I just don't know where we're going yet.
Wow. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of stories for the reader, right? As they grab a copy of your first book. Second book's coming, by the way, everybody. First book, though, we jump in. Give us kind of an overview. What would you say to a reader, first time reader of your book? What can we anticipate? How is the book structured? I really want the person listening to go, this is a book for me, and
Yeah.
I know someone else that I'm going to buy a copy for and send it to them too.
Sure.
So
Sure.
explain it to us in those terms so that we can kind of get a sense of where we're going to go in the book.
So for the reader, I'm going to introduce to you a whole new world that most of you are probably not even aware of. That's been there for a long time, that just has not gotten a lot of publicity. As I mentioned, there's television shows about NCIS. There's probably about 12 different spinoffs by now.
Yeah.
But this is the Air Force. And normally when you see the Air Force in movies, you see fighter jets, trailing Air Force One. But the majority of the people in the Air Force are not pilots. The majority of the people in the Air Force are enlisted people that do the majority of the work, the backbone of the Air Force. And the majority of the special agents within the Office of Special Investigations are enlisted people. And so what I wanted to do is tell their story, to pull back the curtain and to allow the reader to experience what they experience as people, not just as agents, what it takes to get into the organization and the stresses that they encounter every day by doing that job. And so, yes, we get into human trafficking, we get into drug investigations and murder and a whole lot of other things that are really going to keep you on the edge of your seat. But what I'm really proud of is telling the story of the agents that are doing their job, how the job affects them in their personal lives, and how they inadvertently, take the stresses from their personal lives back into their job. And every day you're dealing with someone else who's having the worst day of their life. And regardless of how well trained you are, how strong willed you are, that starts to wear on you. If you're interviewing someone who just experienced a very, very traumatic event, and then the next day you're doing the same thing, and then the next day you're doing the same thing. At some point, it starts to weigh on your own spirit, and the next thing you know, you're going into a certain type of depression if you're not careful, and if you don't have the people around you to help support you. And so I wanted to be able to tell the story of those people who are not only putting their lives on the line to defend the country, but are a lot of times ruining their own home life, their own personal relationships because of the stresses that they encounter just by carrying that badge every day.
So we walk into a movie theater, we got our popcorn, the lights go down, and on the screen you see based on a true story, right? And you're like,
right.
Ooh. Okay. So are we going to get that feeling from your book and your writing? It's all based on true stories. These are actual events that happened. Something's changed, obviously, but the underlying current, these are real events that you lived through.
Yeah. 75% of the first book happened. I had to change some things around, and then about 25% is fiction. So overall, I would say it's a fiction story, but in some way or form, the events that happened. So what I found, because there were so many, interesting investigations that took place within that 12-month period in South Korea, the easiest way for me to write it and for the reader to understand was to mix those investigations into one connected story. Otherwise, it would be so confusing. It'd be hard to follow. But the things that are represented in the book actually happen. Change some names around and move some events around just to make it a better story to tell within the book. But when the story starts in the book, we meet our main character. His name is Devin. He happens to be a jet engine mechanic, and he is presented with an opportunity to become a special agent with the Air Force OSI. And he thinks this is the greatest thing that's ever going to happen to him. And he's excited to tell his girlfriend about it because he thinks, this is a person he's going to be with for the rest of his life. And this is an opportunity for them to move to the next level in their relationship, But she wants nothing to do with it because, like a lot of African Americans, she has certain feelings about law enforcement. And she does not want him to be in law enforcement. She doesn't want to be around law enforcement. She doesn't want anything to do with it. And so immediately in our book, we have these two people who are in this committed relationship, but they quickly find themselves at a crossroads because he has done all these things to get to this point because he wants to be able to take care of her for years into the future. And then he realizes that all these things that he's trained for, all the classes he's taken, could have been for nothing because she wants nothing to do with it. So they both have to make a decision. You know, is he going to go into OSI and stay with her? And for her, is she going to follow him where he goes, or is she just going to end a relationship? So the book is about him being an agent. So I guess you can kind of tell which decision he made. However,
Yeah.
that romantic story follows them throughout not only this book, but the 3-part series that's coming in the future.
Wow. Okay. I like to hear that. As a reader, I love finding an author that's working on new projects around the same story because there's more to look forward to, right? I think that's great. Interesting. Okay, so if we were able to meet Devin, if he was able to jump on the podcast with us right now, how does he present? Can you kind of give us a little bit of his personality?
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain him a little bit more? Like if you're introducing him in front of a group of people and you're saying, hey, Devin's coming up. Here's Devin. Here's who he is. How would you explain him?
I would introduce Devin as a young man. He's in his mid to late 20s.
Okay.
Very smart, but very calm demeanor. Quiet guy from Alabama. A little bit of a southern accent, but he's traveled quite a bit, so kind of lost the majority of it. Really laid back. Grew up in church. Really close with his family. He's the type of person that enjoys the moment, but really looks forward to the future. He's always planning, what do I need to do to get to the next step? Vices his girlfriend who likes to live in the moment, which is why we have that problem early in the book, because she just wants everything to remain as it is. And he's thinking, well, I've got to do this so that 10 years from now, everything can still be, happy between us. But again, he's the type of person that's always trying to challenge himself. And we'll find out that he is not perfect by far. And as you're reading through the story, you're going to wonder, why is he making these decisions? There's no way a sane person would make the decisions he's making. But he is a flawed individual. He works hard. He tries his best to be the best agent he can. But he is not James Bond. He is not Jason Bourne. He is a person who is learning and making a lot of mistakes. And the problems that come up in the book tend to come up because he's so inexperienced. He's talking to people and meeting people because he thinks that's part of the job. But he talks and meets the wrong people who knows who he is, but he has no idea who they are. And it turns out that they just happen to be engaging in a whole lot of bad things. And so later in the book, we'll see that the hunters become the hunted. And he has to figure out a way to flip the script to go back on the offense, because he's been on the defense for quite a while throughout the book.
So this leads into a great segue into a story that you and I shared together, and you mentioned this to me. I'm just going to set it up with a badge and a pharmacy.
Yeah.
Can you take it from here, Derrick?
Yeah.
Let's go.
So the way I wrote it in the book is exactly how it happened in real life, to be honest with you. So I'm at Osan. I get called into my boss's office, and she says, you're going to take over all the drug investigations. And again, I'm like maybe a year on the job, haven't run a lot of drug investigations at this point. And I'm thinking, wow, how do I even get started? Other than, someone getting caught and we get a phone call that, hey, they found some drugs. How do I get this thing started? And some of my partners told me that they received a phone call from the pharmacy because they were asking about biological threats in South Korea. They just wanted to make sure that they had the right types of vaccines on hand. So I'm looking at them like, why are you telling me that? And I didn't connect what they were saying is go to the pharmacy, talk to people, and then maybe you can get a foot in. Maybe there are people that are abusing prescriptions. Maybe some medication has been missing. Just give them a point of contact with our office. Great. Sounds good. So my partner and I traveled over to the base pharmacy, and I knocked on the door. The door opens, and I pulled up my badge and credentials. How you doing? I'm Agent Jackson. I'm here to see Sergeant, so-and-so. And the guy's eyes got huge. And I'm
Oh
like,
crap! Oh crap! Oh
why
crap!
is this guy
Yeah,
freaking out?
yeah.
All right. And I explained what it was. And he says, oh, yeah, come on back and takes me to meet his boss. And he says, hey, there are two OSI agents here to talk to you. And the guy looks up and his eyes get huge as well. And we're like, okay, that's twice. That's weird. What's going on here? So we talked to this guy for a few minutes, and then before we leave, he introduces us to his boss. And again, this guy freaks out when he sees us. And we're like, why are these people acting so weird around us, right? You were just normal people. Come to find out later that they were engaging in stealing a medication from the pharmacy. And when we just happened to show up out of the blue, they thought that someone on their team must have been a rat because you don't just get two federal agents knocking on the door for no reason. But in reality, it was just two federal agents knocking on the door for no reason. And so that triggers a lot of bad things in the book. And they happen to be connected to another organization who is bringing in some young ladies from the Philippines that are being trafficked and forced into sex work. And so the medication that's being stolen kind of commingles with the trafficking that's going on. And then
Wow.
we have a counterintelligence situation because the girls are then being used to pump intelligence from the American airmen. After they get them drunk, they get them high off the medication. The airmen think, hey, I'm just paying for a good time. And they end up talking about things that they shouldn't be talking about.
Right.
So that is
Wow.
that's going kind of deep into the story, but it goes a lot deeper than that, and we're really going to get a good sense for why the bad guys are actually doing this trafficking. Because if you look at it, you would think, why on earth would anyone want to be kidnapping people, forcing them into becoming sex slaves and selling themselves?
Yeah.
But then once we pull back the layer of the person who's actually behind it, we realize that he doesn't even want to be doing it. He thinks that he has no option because if he doesn't do it, then it's going to be happening to his own people. And so they're trying to prepare for what could be coming next for his own people. And so doesn't make it right, but it gives you a little bit of more understanding of why things could be happening.
So, as you're operating as an agent and going like around the base and doing all this, is the base in a different foreign country its own separate thing where the country has no jurisdiction over what happens on the base? Like, is there like a line where someone from South Korea can't do anything to somebody when they're on base and they do something wrong? Is it like,
Uh,
how does that work? I don't even understand how that works.
that's very it's kind of difficult to explain because there are different rules depending on what country you're in. It's called a
Oh, okay.
SOFA, the Status of Forces Agreement. And so you can have different rules depending on what country you're operating in. Normally, if you're on the base, the United States will control, pretty much what happens on that base.
Okay.
However, they have to abide by whatever rules they agreed upon with the host nation. So
Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
it's
So,
going to
yeah.
differ depending on what location you go to.
So if someone leaves the base and goes into the community and commits a crime off base,
Yeah.
they're then subject to that investigation as well as potentially an
Could be.
investigation from, right?
Could be, yeah.
So yeah, so
if
yeah,
you say
okay.
you're in Japan, you possibly could be investigated by the Japanese police department,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
at the same time being investigated by OSI or the army or whoever it is.
Okay. Yeah, I just never understood how that kind of worked because you're there for a period of time and then you move to some other location. And then all these different countries have different rules and
Right.
traditions and customs and all that stuff, right? So, yeah, I just didn't realize where your line stops and where your line starts as far as what you're responsible for in your role as well.
Yeah. For the most part, anything on the base, we will be responsible for. However, even back here, in the States, there are certain things that we can and can't do off base. But anything for us that had a tie to the Air Force, you know, game on. If you were uh, a local drug dealer, but you were selling drugs to members of the Air Force, that gave us a nexus to target that person, even if that person was a civilian. Same thing with contract fraud. If you're, if you have a contract with the Air Force, but you're downtown New York City, but you have a connection to the Air Force, that gives us the ability to investigate that company.
So I have a very small version of what I'm hearing from you from what I've done. I would work in retail. This is really a very small version of what you're doing. But I was working in retail. I got a position working for loss prevention for the company. And I left my retail store job to go work at the office, sent from the office back to my store location where I used to work. And now I walk into to theft where someone in the store was stealing stuff and then claiming it as never showed up. But I have all the information and all the power to come and investigate. So I'm coming into my own turf. The people I used to sit in the lunchroom with next to them, and I'm now investigating them. Yeah. When I walk through the door, they're laughing at me like, oh, you got fired from the office, right? And I'm like, no, I need to see you in the office. And they're looking at me, and like that dynamic changed, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But I found that in that role, I could either become arrogant and I have a title, I'm now better than you because I'm in this new role, or I could be an ally to help people make better decisions, right? So for you, you went from fixing engines for an airplane to be an investigator. Were you treated differently then by people that you worked with and knew?
I had the same story that you had. I told you after I graduated from training, they sent me back to the same base. And so I was working on the flight line. And, when I was going to cross training, a lot of people kind of looked at me kind of funny, like, why are you going into OSI? Because you heard so many stories about them being undercover and arresting people for all kinds of, crazy stuff they got into. And so when I came right back to the same base, there are a lot of the people that I knew from, 6 months prior that I had been working with for a long time. And some of them decided that they didn't want to speak to me ever again. They didn't trust me at that point. It was like, yep, you no longer exist to us. But thankfully, most of the people that I worked with were really kind to me and just really, wanted to learn about, my new career and where it was going to take me. But there were absolutely some people who would see me and turn around and walk the other way because they didn't trust me. They didn't know if the first time I was there as a mechanic, they were wondering, well, was he undercover the whole time? Which I wasn't, but
no.
I heard all of that. That's why it was so weird for me to go back to the same place that I had just worked as an investigator.
Now I know we're talking about Devin, but did Devin have a similar experience to that then?
No, Devin didn't have, we changed it a little bit in the book, so Devin didn't have that experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would Devin's story be different? Had you included something along that line?
Had I included that, it would have been exactly the same. It would have been just for the time frame. So in real life, I left Hawaii and went to Panama City, and from Panama City, I went into OSI. Okay. So within the book, I kind of took Panama City out, and I did the Hawaii recruitment, and then from Hawaii to Panama City without the mechanic experience in Panama City.
What are you most proud about this book? What makes you happy?
It's that I get to tell the story of a lot of people that, really didn't get a lot of exposure. People who are doing a very dangerous job, people who work a lot of long, hard hours, people who go through a ton of training, who carry a lot of burden, who have the weight of the world on their shoulders at times, who travel around the world, who work long hours. And again, no one ever even knows their story. And so I'm able to shine a light on that through my book. And I know there are some others who are actually writing books as well. And I encourage them to keep doing so. But I'm happy to show the rest of the world, hey, look at these stories, look at these people, and look at the amazing job that they do.
What have you heard from people who know you in that role, who have now read the book, that really stuck with you, that was really meaningful What kind of comments have you heard back?
I was so nervous because I didn't know what they would think, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I didn't, I kept thinking, well, someone's going to ask me, well, why are you writing the book? What makes you the person to tell the story? Why are you qualified to do this? That's what I thought I was going to hear. But the feedback that I've gotten is, we are so proud of you. Keep going, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you. And I've had a couple of people reach out to me and ask if they could be characters in the upcoming books. So that was some great encouragement that, yeah, absolutely. I could definitely find a spot for you.
So, okay, so if you need a podcaster from Canada to be in the next book, I got my hand up. I'll be one of your characters, okay? The podcaster guy.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. There you go. I love it. I'm in the book, everybody. Yay. That's exciting. The podcast I have is called Living the Next Chapter, Derrick, so I got to ask. You did kind of tell us a little bit that there's new stuff coming. How are you, as an author, living your next chapter?
I'm trying to determine what else of my career do I want to put in the books. And so I'm happy to tell you, 2 weeks ago, I finished writing the second book, which is based on my experience traveling the world during counterintelligence. So in the book, I think we're going to 4 or 5 different countries. It's a lot different from the first book. The first book is an introduction. There's a lot of dialogue. It's really getting to know who the characters are and why they chose to do what they do. And in the second book, we see our characters doing what they do. It's a lot more action. It's a lot more fast paced. And the first book is a person determining who is it that I want to become. And we see that person becoming that person in the second book. And so he changes because his experience changes. The things that he goes through, the heartbreak, the having to build himself back up, all that turns him into the person that we're going to see in the second book. And because of that, my writing had to change to fit his personality, because he's definitely not the same person he was in the second book. And so for me, having just finished that, I'm trying to determine, how do I end the series? Because I had planned to write, 3 books, but there's still so much more that I could tell. But I don't just want to tell, a reflection of my career. I want to tell a good story. It's a fictional story, influenced by my career. But, the feedback that I've gotten from so many people is they want to know more about certain characters. What are they doing? What's next for them? And so I'm trying to, spend a lot of time just thinking, how do I finish this out and allow the reader to feel complete when they're done reading it? Because what I want them to experience is, I want them to be completely exhausted by the time they read the third book. I want them to feel every emotion they could possibly feel, as though they're sitting in the theater watching the Avengers, and it goes off and you don't know what else to think, because you've just experienced more than you ever thought you would experience. So that's my goal to round out the series.
So before we wrap up, Derrick, where do you want to send people to follow your journey as an author, to stay in contact with you and follow the new works that are coming down the road? People are going to listen to this episode in the future. So where's the best place to send people that are curious to follow your journey?
So right now, I'm working on building my author website.
Good.
But you can find my work on Amazon, on Books A Million, online at Walmart. And there's contact information inside of the book if you want to reach out to me personally. There's an email address where you can do so. And I would really appreciate your support.
Awesome. And when you buy a copy, buy 2, one for you and one for someone that you care about and think would love this book, leave a great review. As readers, that's one thing we can do to honor our author friends. Support them by leaving a detailed review, which tells people why you love the book so much. Because I know that Derrick would love to hear your thoughts about the book. That really encourages him to keep writing and encourages other people to make a buying decision and go, yeah, this is the right book for me. So that's our job as readers. Everybody do that. So Derrick, you did talk about the changes that happened in the character during the writing. But the other thing we talked about, you and I, was there was a change as far as the ideal reader for your book in the process of writing. Can you talk a little bit as we close off? What happened for the reader? What was your intent and what happened?
So, with so much of it being based off of, criminal investigations. When I started writing this book, Shadow One, I thought it would be perfect for the reader who's looking for a true crime thriller book. But as I started writing and the story started taking over for itself, and the characters started, demanding a little bit more attention throughout the manuscript, it turned into it's still a true crime thriller, but there's so much more of a romantic story than I expected when I started writing this. And to be honest, the majority of the questions that I get are not about the criminal investigations. They're about the romance that we see from the very first chapter. I think is on the very first page of the book, we start with that romance. And the majority of the questions I get are about, well, what's going to happen next with that character? And all I can tell you right now is that character is going to follow us throughout.
Oh, that's a good little hook. I like that. That's good. That's good. Well done. Well done. Okay, so that's interesting. And that wasn't your intent, right? It wasn't meant intent to be a romance type themed book. That was like an element, but not a main focus.
Right. Not at all. It was, I kind of wanted to introduce that person and then just kind of let it go. But that person, for some reason, kept tapping on my shoulder saying, hey, what about this? You need to add a little bit more here.
There you go.
And I had a very short period before we got into the meat of the investigations where my job was to make the reader absolutely fall in love with her quickly. And I guess I achieved that because so many people are asking me questions about what is she doing now? What else can we expect from that character? So that's one of the things I'm proudest of because it was something that I didn't intend when I initially started writing.
You talked about in the beginning about writing reports, and that's one way of writing, which got you into writing. Great. But that story is a different type of writing than writing reports. So for the authors, as we kind of wrap up, any key elements to a good story that you'd tell a new author as they start their journey?
When I got to places where I was struggling a little bit, the thing that helped me to get through that was listening to music. And I didn't have any specific songs that I listened to. Honestly, when I was scrolling on TikTok, certain songs would jump out at me and it would remind me of a scene that I needed to write for the book. And it's usually a scene that I was struggling with. And so I would just listen to that song over and over. And I found myself writing to express the emotion that song put me in, especially when it came to the romantic scenes within the book. There are certain songs I could listen to that kind of express the emotion that I thought the characters would be feeling at that moment. And that allowed me to be a lot more expressive in my writing.
It's a great tip, Derrick. I like that. That's really good.
Thank you.
I love it. Thank you for being here, for being on the show. As new projects come out, I know the audience loves to hear from the author again. Mm-hmm. So I'll leave the door open. I'll leave the seat vacant for you. When it's time, come back, give us an update on the next book in the series, and let's continue this conversation because I think people would love to hear from you more and celebrate with you on the launch of the next project. I'd love to have you come back.
Thank you. I'd love to come back. I had a great time.
Excellent. Everyone, all the information is always in the show notes. Would love, again, when you buy a copy of the book from Derrick, to make sure you leave great reviews, tell people, share this episode with somebody, maybe someone that's served in the military, served their country well. Let them know about this episode, and I'm sure they'd be very interested to hear Derrick's point of view from this side. Again, Derrick, thank you for your service to your country.
Thank you.
And for being a great representation of how amazing America is. As a Canadian, watching you from across the border, what I love about America is people who serve their country proudly and the high esteem you have for the people that have served beside you. I find that very inspiring. So thank you for that. And for everyone listening that is serving overseas right now or wherever you are, thank you again for serving. And Derrick, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Hey, as we exit the podcast, as we leave out the door, I know the car's running. Somebody's eagerly waiting for you to get out there and go home. As we exit the podcast, I just want to ask, if you have time, I would truly appreciate it. We ask for you to do this for our authors. When you buy your book, we ask you to leave a review. Why? Because it means a lot to the author and it tells other people that the book is great. Now, you don't hear me ask for this very often, so I'm going to do this here because we're friends, right? You and I are friends. I would love a review of this show because it'll tell more people to come and listen to this podcast. So if you have Apple, wherever you're listening, there's probably some way to give a star rating or leave a comment about the show. YouTube, you can always leave comments on YouTube. Every episode's there. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a review, leave a rating, and share this with somebody. That's probably the best way to grow the podcast, is for you to share it. And by listening to the end of the episode, like you're doing right now, tells all the apps this is a good podcast. So thank you for already helping me by listening to this part. But go leave a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you for being part of the podcast family.